Job chapter 1, verse 1, there was a man. Job chapter 1, verse 6, there was a day. That's the book of Job, a man of unparalleled piety and well-deserved prosperity who undergoes a barrage of suffering that remains to him inexplicable. Commenting on the book of Job is a dangerous thing. Job is repeatedly rebuked throughout the book for trying to assess his situation. And in chapter 40, verse 4, he decides to put his hand over his mouth. But we need to study and preach and teach the book of Job because of, well, several things. Number one, it's a masterpiece of divine revelation. It's not short, it's not easy, but it's powerful and profound. Spurgeon preached 88 sermons on Job. Calvin preached 159. Job majorly shaped so many New Testament books, especially the book of Romans. But the masterpiece is that it puts on display the reality of human suffering. The British poet John Donne calls this day of suffering that met Job, Job's sick day. And what you see in the book of Job is that faith can survive loss, that faith can hold on to belief, that belief itself can be unbelievably strong. Another lesson that we find in the book of Job is the worth of God is not dependent on our comfort and blessing. The great beginning of the book of Job, and I'd encourage you to preach not just the beginning, but the whole thing. But the lesson at the beginning is Job is proven to be a worshiper who worships God not because of the blessings and benefits God gives him, but because of who God is. And that vindicates Job's worship. As he goes through this personal and disastrous suffering in his life, he continues to bless God's name, and he doesn't deviate from that. Another lesson that we need from the book of Job is the reminder that suffering is not only a part of life in a fallen world, but that it's a holy gift from God. And we do everything in our power to avoid suffering because suffering hurts, but we cannot dodge suffering in a fallen world. And we're reminded throughout the book of Job that this is what life is like. I used to think Job was exceptional, but when I preached through the book of Job, I found story after story of people who had similar experiences, profound suffering, and they needed to know how they could keep on trusting God. And that's exactly what Job is showing us. Job is not just timely in its assessment and treatment of suffering. Job, through the testimony of his unhelpful friends, provides us with timeless worldviews. The three friends believe wrong things that people still believe today. Their adherence to naturalism and science and history and philosophy are all rationalistic arguments that do not answer Job's greater point. People still think wrong about suffering today, and it provides us a corrective worldview. The most important lesson that we get from Job is that we hear God's voice through pain. There is an unbelievable belief on display in the book of Job, and after he endures all the suffering of his friends' poor counsel, he finally receives a theophanic vision of God. God shows himself to Job, but God doesn't give Job any pat answers. Instead, he just shows his godness, and he proves his rightness. And that's what the book of Job can give to humans who suffer. It can show you that faith is perseverant, that God is faithful, and that everything he does is right. And ultimately, the book of Job will make a way for us to be ready to receive a Savior like Jesus, who is a suffering Messiah, who held on to the wisdom of God and who displayed for us God's unguessable ways when he died on the cross and rose from the grave.